You know that person who was always there for everyone? The one who listened to every problem, absorbed every emotion, held space for every breakdown? They were the emotional sanctuary in a world of chaos. And then, one day, they vanished. No explanation, no farewell, just silence. Carl Jung identified this as one of the most misunderstood psychological transformations in human nature. This is not a tantrum. This is not a phase. This is a permanent shift that occurs when an empath's consciousness finally catches up with what their unconscious has been recording for years. What you are about to discover is why the kindest person you know might disappear forever, and why Jung believed this moment was not only inevitable, but necessary. Here's the question that haunts those left behind. What pushes a healer to close the door forever? Time 0.6. Society has painted empaths with the same tired brush for centuries. Too sensitive, too emotional, too fragile for the real world. The assumption is always weakness, never strength. But Jung saw something entirely different. He recognized empaths as potentially the most powerful psychological type, once integrated, not in spite of their sensitivity, but because of it. The empath absorbs information that others cannot access. They read micro-expressions in milliseconds. They sense emotional shifts before words are spoken. They feel the room's psychological temperature the moment they enter. This is not weakness. This is advanced pattern recognition, operating at a level most people will never reach. But here's where it gets dark. Jung discovered that empaths do not just feel deeply. They accumulate. Every unprocessed emotion from the people around them gets stored somewhere in their psyche. Every lie they pretend not to notice. Every manipulation they excuse. Every betrayal they forgive. It all goes into a psychological reservoir that has a breaking point. Jung called this the accumulation of shadow. Not their own shadow initially, but everyone else's. The empath becomes a dumping ground for the darkness that others refuse to acknowledge in themselves. And for years, sometimes decades, they carry this burden silently. They make excuses for people who don't deserve them. They give chances to those who have already shown their true nature. They hope that unconditional love will somehow transform the unworthy into something better. It never does. Consider a case profile that illustrates this pattern with devastating clarity. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of someone we'll explore as a composite example, based on patterns Jung observed repeatedly. This individual spent 28 years being the family peacemaker, the friend who always picked up the phone at 3 in the morning, the partner who absorbed every emotional explosion without complaint. On the surface, this person seemed content in their role. But Jung would have recognized what was really happening. Every time they silenced their own needs to accommodate someone else's crisis, they were making a deposit into that psychological reservoir. Every time they explained away selfish behavior as a misunderstanding, they were adding weight to a burden that would eventually become unbearable. The people around them had no idea what was accumulating. They saw someone who was endlessly patient, infinitely forgiving, always available. They mistook this person's silence for agreement, their accommodation for approval, their exhaustion for peace. But beneath the surface, something was being recorded. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being taken for granted. The empath's unconscious mind was cataloging everything, even as their conscious mind made excuses. The quiet cutoff does not happen randomly. It follows a pattern so predictable that Jung could map it across the cases he studied. Understanding these stages is understanding why the empath who disappears is not being cruel. They are being conscious for the first time. The first stage is absorption. This is the long accumulation phase. Years of being the emotional shock absorber for narcissists, energy vampires, and broken people who refuse to do their own healing work. The empath becomes the unpaid therapist, the constant forgiver, the eternal optimist who believes in everyone's potential while ignoring everyone's patterns. During this phase, the empath is not actually unaware. This is crucial. They see everything. They notice every contradiction, every lie, every moment of exploitation. But they have been conditioned to doubt their own perceptions. They have been told their entire lives that they are too sensitive, that they read too much into things, that they should give people the benefit of the doubt. So they silence their own knowing. They gaslight themselves before anyone else can. They apologize for having boundaries. They feel guilty for feeling hurt. This is not ignorance. This is systematic self-betrayal in the name of being a good person. Let's look at a narrative illustration of how this absorption phase operates in practice. Picture an empath who notices their best friend only calls when they need something, never to check in, never to celebrate the empath's wins, only when there's drama that needs processing or a favor that needs granting. The empath notices this pattern. Their intuition screams it at them, but they immediately talk themselves out of their own knowing. Maybe their friend is just going through a hard time. Maybe they're busy. Maybe the empath is being selfish for expecting reciprocity. Maybe they're reading too much into it. This internal negotiation happens thousands of times across thousands of interactions. Each time, the empath chooses to doubt themselves rather than trust what they clearly see. Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Each time, they prioritize the other person's comfort over their own truth. And each time, the resentment grows deeper, even as they smile and say it's fine. The second stage is the clarity event. This is the moment the rose-colored glasses shatter. Usually, it is a betrayal so profound that it bypasses all of the empath's defense mechanisms. The person they trusted most reveals themselves completely. The friend they defended stabs them in the back. The partner they sacrificed for chooses themselves without hesitation. The family member they protected throws them under the bus to save their own reputation. But here's what makes the clarity event so devastating. It is not just about what happened. It is about the sudden recognition of a pattern they have been denying for years. In that moment, the empath does not just see this one betrayal. They see every other time this pattern played out. Every warning sign they ignored. Every red flag they explained away. Every moment their intuition screamed danger and they chose to believe the lie instead. We see this dynamic clearly in a composite scenario based on patterns Jung would have recognized. Imagine an empath who discovers their partner has been lying about something fundamental. Not a small lie, but something that recontextualizes years of the relationship. In that moment of discovery, it is not just the current lie that devastates them. It is the sudden recognition of all the other times their gut told them something was off, and they ignored it. The times they felt uneasy, but convinced themselves they were being paranoid. The moments they sensed deception, but chose to believe the explanation instead. All of those suppressed knowings come flooding back at once. The clarity event is not one incident. It is the collapse of an entire worldview. The empath realizes they have been participating in their own destruction, and that realization changes everything. The third stage is shadow integration. This is where the transformation becomes irreversible. Jung understood that the empath has been suppressing not just pain, but power, their anger, their discernment, their capacity for ruthless boundaries, their willingness to walk away without explanation. All of this has been living in their shadow, labeled as bad or unspiritual or unkind. But after the clarity event, something shifts. The empath stops suppressing their own darkness. They stop pretending that unconditional love means unconditional tolerance. They stop believing that setting boundaries makes them the villain. They integrate the part of themselves that can say no without guilt, that can see manipulation without making excuses for it, that can recognize emotional vampires and refuse to be drained. This is not the empath becoming cruel. This is the empath becoming complete. They still have their sensitivity. They still have their compassion. But now they also have discernment. They can feel everything and still choose to protect themselves. That combination is what makes an integrated empath psychologically untouchable. Consider a case profile that demonstrates this integration process. We observe this pattern in someone who spent years absorbing a parent's emotional instability. Every time the parent had a meltdown, this person would calm them down, manage their emotions, take responsibility for keeping the peace. They suppressed their own anger at being parentified because expressing it felt cruel. But during shadow integration, something shifts. They stop seeing their anger as the problem. They start seeing it as information. That anger is telling them something true. What is happening is not okay. It never was okay. And their willingness to keep absorbing dysfunction is not helping anyone, least of all themselves. So they integrate that anger, not by becoming rageful, but by using it as fuel for boundaries. They stop taking the late-night crisis calls. They stop managing someone else's emotional regulation. They stop sacrificing their peace to maintain someone else's comfort. And they do it without guilt, because they finally understand that protecting dysfunction is not the same as protecting a person. The fourth stage is the devaluation of words. This is subtle but critical. The empath stops explaining themselves. They stop trying to make others understand. They stop defending their reality to people who are committed to misunderstanding them, because they finally recognize a truth that changes everything. Words are useless against people who have already decided who you are. Explanations do not work on those who benefit from your confusion. Clarity cannot penetrate willful ignorance. The empath has spent years trying to communicate their pain to people who weaponize vulnerability. They have poured their heart out to those who use honesty as ammunition. They realize that some people do not deserve access to their inner world. That intimacy with the wrong people is self-destruction. That silence is not weakness, but wisdom. So they stop talking, not because they have nothing to say, but because they finally understand who deserves to hear it. Let's examine a narrative illustration of this principle in action. Picture an empath who has just set a boundary with a family member. The family member demands an explanation. They want to know why the empath is suddenly being so cold, so distant, so unreasonable. The old version of this empath would have spent hours trying to explain. They would have carefully outlined every hurt, every boundary violation, every moment of disrespect. They would have hoped that if they could just make the person understand, things would change. But the integrated empath recognizes the trap. They know that any explanation will be twisted. Any vulnerability will be used against them. Any attempt at communication will become another opportunity for manipulation and gaslighting. So they simply say, "I'm not available for this anymore," and they offer nothing else. The family member escalates. They accuse the empath of being cruel, of abandoning them, of changing into someone unrecognizable. They demand closure, explanation, conversation. But the empath remains silent, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. They have finally learned that some people are not asking questions because they want answers. They are asking questions to create openings for more manipulation. The fifth and final stage is the door slam. This is not loud. There is no dramatic confrontation, no final speech, no closure conversation. The empath simply disappears. They block numbers. They delete contacts. They move on without explanation, and they never look back. To those left behind, this seems cruel or cold or out of character. How could someone so kind become so ruthless? But the empath is not being ruthless. They are being efficient. They know that any explanation will be twisted. Any goodbye will be manipulated. Any conversation will become another opportunity for gaslighting. So they choose the only option that protects their peace: absolute silence. The door does not just close, it locks. And there is no key. Jung documented patterns showing that empaths who reach this final stage do not act from hatred. They act from clarity. They no longer hate the people they are removing. They simply see them clearly for the first time, and what they see is incompatible with the life they are choosing to build. But there is something happening beneath all of this that explains why this transformation is permanent. The empath's brain is literally rewiring itself. Neuroscience has revealed that pattern recognition is not just psychological, it is neurological. When the empath finally stops denying the patterns they have been seeing, their brain creates new neural pathways that cannot be undone. The people they used to love now trigger the same neural response as threats. Not because the empath is being dramatic, but because their brain has finally categorized these relationships correctly. Where there used to be trust, there is now recognition of danger. Where there used to be hope, there is now acceptance of who people actually are versus who the empath wanted them to be. This is not a choice. This is evolution. The brain adapts to protect itself. Once it recognizes a pattern of harm, it cannot unrecognize it. The empath cannot go back to seeing these people through the old lens because that lens has been permanently shattered. Every interaction is now filtered through awareness that cannot be reversed. This is why people who get cut off by an integrated empath never get back in. It is not punishment, it is protection. The empath's entire nervous system now rejects what it once tolerated. Here is the part that society gets catastrophically wrong. They assume the empath who cuts everyone off has lost their ability to love, that they have become cold or damaged or closed off. This is the opposite of truth. The integrated empath has not lost their capacity for love. They have simply become selective about where that love flows. They love more deeply than before, but only with those who have earned it. They are more compassionate than ever, but only toward those who do not weaponize that compassion. They are more open than they used to be, but only with people who have proven themselves trustworthy through consistent action, not manipulative words. The empath has not become a victim of their trauma. They have become sovereign. They are no longer available for relationships that require them to betray themselves. They are no longer interested in connections that demand their silence. They are no longer willing to shrink so that others can feel comfortable. This is not bitterness. This is boundaries. This is not coldness. This is consciousness. The integrated empath is not running from love. They are running toward a version of themselves that refuses to participate in their own destruction ever again. And this is where Jung's insight becomes crucial. He recognized that this transformation is not pathological. It is necessary. The empath who never integrates their shadow remains a perpetual victim, endlessly recycling the same painful patterns with different people. But the empath who goes through this death and rebirth emerges as something far more powerful. They become what Jung called the individuated self, someone who has integrated both light and shadow, someone who can be soft without being weak, someone who can be kind without being exploitable, someone who knows exactly who they are and refuses to negotiate that truth for anyone's comfort. If you have gone through this process, you are not crazy, you are not cold, you are not broken, you are integrated. And integration, Jung believed, is the highest form of psychological development a human being can achieve. You have not lost your empathy. You have gained discernment. You have not become heartless. You have become self-protective. You have not closed yourself off to love. You have opened yourself up to the kind of love that does not require you to destroy yourself to maintain it. The people you cut off will never understand this. They will paint you as the villain in their story. They will tell everyone who will listen that you changed, that you are not the person you used to be, that you abandoned them without reason. Let them. Their narrative about you is not your responsibility to correct. You know the truth. You know the years of accumulation. You know the moment of clarity. You know the shadow you integrated. You know why words became worthless. You know why the door had to close. And you know that this was not cruelty. This was self-preservation. Jung spent his career studying transformation, and the patterns he observed about empaths who reach this point reveal that they do not just survive their awakening. They thrive in ways they never could have while playing small for people who did not deserve them. They build lives of remarkable peace. They cultivate relationships of genuine reciprocity. They create boundaries so strong that energy vampires cannot even approach them. They become living proof that sensitivity is not weakness when paired with consciousness, that empathy is not vulnerability when protected by discernment, that kindness is not passivity when backed by the willingness to walk away. The integrated empath is not everyone's friend, but they are their own protector, and that changes everything. If you close the door on someone and it stays closed, understand what that means. Your unconscious recognized a threat that your conscious mind was still making excuses for. Your nervous system protected you when your heart was still hoping for change. Your intuition saved you from another cycle of the same pain with a different name. Trust that. Honor that. Protect that. Because the empath who quietly cuts everyone off and never goes back is not the tragedy. The tragedy is the empath who never learns this lesson, who dies having given their entire life to people who never valued it, who reaches the end having betrayed themselves 1,000 times in the name of being understanding. You chose differently. You chose yourself, and in doing so, you chose the path that Jung believed was the only one worth walking. The path of individuation, the path of integration, the path of becoming whole. The kindest thing you ever did was learning when to stop being kind to those who mistook your compassion for weakness. The strongest thing you ever did was walking away without needing them to understand why. The most loving thing you ever did was finally loving yourself enough to refuse relationships that required your destruction. This is not the end of your capacity to connect. This is the beginning of your capacity to connect authentically, with people who see you, with people who value you, with people who would never dream of exploiting the gift that you are. Carl Jung knew something that most people never learn. The empath's journey is not from sensitivity to numbness. It is from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. And that journey, painful as it is, creates the kind of human being the world desperately needs. Someone who can feel everything and still protect themselves. Someone who can see clearly and still choose love. Someone who knows the darkness and still commits to the light. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what consciousness evolution requires, and everyone you cut off was simply not capable of existing in the reality you are building. The door you closed was not cruelty, it was clarity, and what you build on the other side of that door will be constructed on a foundation that cannot be shaken by those who never valued what you offered in the first place. If you recognize yourself in this, if you have walked through these 5 stages, if you have closed doors that others think should stay open, comment below, "I closed the door." Let this be your declaration, your confirmation that you are not alone in this transformation, that you are part of a lineage of empaths who chose consciousness over comfort, sovereignty over sacrifice, truth over the lies that keep people small. Subscribe for more insights into the psychological patterns that Jung dedicated his life to understanding, because this is just the beginning of what he discovered about people who see too much, feel too deeply, and finally learn to protect what they are. The door you closed was not an ending, it was a beginning, and what comes next is built on the foundation of a self that refuses to be betrayed ever again. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.